Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joey Lee, Chief Learning Officer at LiFT Learning, and I am pleased and honored to be joined by Dr. Melissa Olson of Spring Lake Park Schools in Minnesota. Welcome to Partnering on the Path, Spring Lake Park Schools and LiFT Learning, a journey to a competency-based education system. Our friends at Aurora have put a link in the chats to the deck that we'll walk through today. It is a resource for you. And really what I like to do is just kind of set the landscape and give a bit around the why this session exists. And really more than anything, this session is focused on storytelling. So we've got really two stories that we're going to share with you. The first that you'll hear from Melissa and Spring Lake Parks and their story of a learner-led personalized, competency-based program in a school that then turned into what is now a district-wide initiative. And they're still on that journey, as Melissa will say. And running parallel, the story of LiFT and our problem of practice in New England, which turned into what is now an organization, a community of schools, a platform built for competency-based and project-based schools, and wraparound support services. So those two paths came together about 1.5, 2 years ago, and we're going to share that story with you, and excited for you to walk away with kind of direct next steps as to how you can continue on your path towards a learner-led, personalized, competency-based system. So with that, I'll turn it over to Melissa for a bit of an agenda.
All right. So our outcomes that are listed there are the same as probably what you saw in your program book. But I think what Joey and I want to highlight as you look at those outcomes is really the goal of this session is to share some of those relatable challenges. It's really to identify some micro shifts. We're going to guess that people in our session are in very different places on this journey. And we really want to build on that collective efficacy so that you can identify whatever the next best step might be for your organization. And the way that we're going to do that is through some context building. Who we are, who is Spring Lake Park Schools, who is LiFT, how did we get here a little bit. We want you to hear that story through some teacher and student voice. And then you'll also have a chance for some small group dialogue as well and some breakout sessions. You're going to learn a little bit about what LiFT Learning is and what it can do in helping with this journey. And we're going to talk about some entry points into competency-based education, and then we'll close it out. So that's really our plan for the day. As we're going through today too, please feel free to pop questions in the chat. We'll get to them if we're able to. We'll also try to get to some at the end, but also we will be providing an opportunity for some further conversation at a different date that Joey will talk about at the end of our session. And so if we don't get to your questions today, maybe just capturing them is a good opportunity so that we can come back to some of those as well. So a little bit about who Spring Lake Park Schools, like who are we? We are a suburb outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're about 15 minutes from Minneapolis, Minnesota. So one of our inner ring suburbs. We are comprised of just shy of 6,200 students. We have 6 schools, 4 elementary schools, a middle school and intermediate school, and then our high school. And then we also have 2 program schools, including a gifted and talented program school and a K-6 online. And we also, one of our elementary schools is a Spanish immersion school that students can continue with Spanish immersion all the way up through their secondary years if they so desire. We have a pretty robust career and college pathways programming at our high school. You can see our icons for our career pathways. We have a business and entrepreneurship pathway, a technology, engineering, and design pathway, and a health and human services pathway. And then we have an initiative called 12 by 12, which is our goal for all of our 12th graders to reach 12 college credits if they so desire by the time they graduate. So we have a number of ways in which students can do that through concurrent enrollment, as well as offering things like advanced placement, Project Lead the Way, some of those more nationally known organizations. If you look at our demographics, you can see that we're a fairly diverse school. We have about 50% of our students are students of color. Both of our EL population and our free and reduced lunch numbers are actually significantly higher than what's listed here. This is the state data from last year. Last I heard, I think our free and reduced lunch is closer to 50% this year. And my point in sharing this all with you is that we're a very typical public school. We're not a private school or a charter school or a magnet school. We're a very typical public school with all of its beautiful blessings. And sometimes that comes with it beautiful challenges when you're trying to make a major shift in education and to a system. So I think that's important. All right, here. And the why of competency-based learning for us at Spring Lake Park really comes down to our vision, which is to foster personalized learning experiences so all of our students feel a sense of value, they feel inspired, and they feel a sense of belonging. And that, we hope, results in college readiness and the development of those academic life and career skills so that each student has aspirations for success. And if you see that image on the right-hand side, that is our vision for innovative and personalized learning. And those 4 circles are really our entry points into this work. And they're the reason that they are infinity loops is because they are interdependent on one another. They inform one another. So for example, it's very difficult to really do competency-based education without flexible use of time and space. But what's great is that approach of looking at learner profiles, competency-based learning, personal learning maps, and flexible use of time and space has given us different entry points for our teachers and our students as well. And we're really different places with each of those 4 circles in our district. So for example, at our elementary schools, some of our work with learner profiles has really taken off. I would say at our secondary schools, our work with flexible use and time and space has really come such a long way in the last few years. So our goal with that is that we want our sites and our teachers to be able to personalize their journey as the same way we want them to personalize for students. And we are very much, as we said at the beginning, on this journey. Feels like we've been in it for many years, which we have. And sometimes it doesn't feel like we've come that far, but we have. And it was on this path that we met LiFT Learning. And I'm going to let Joey tell you a little bit about who they are.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. So LiFT's story really starts in a classroom in New England at a time when the state of Vermont was putting a focus and policy on proficiency-based learning, and our co-founders in the creation of LiFT was rooted in the desire to create learner-led projects and let the students drive those projects based on interest and passion, all the while identify and develop skills and competencies to let students feel a greater sense of agency and self-efficacy. And that all sounds really well, and it didn't necessarily gel too well with what is an industrial model or traditional assessment practices, or even the schedule in and of itself. And so that led us to create LiFT. And LiFT in its early days was working more with alternative schools of ed, charters of places that had more flexibility. And it was just a platform, a digital tool, an LMS. And over time, through our relationships with schools and the continuing emergence and trends within K-12, we've evolved. And much like Melissa said, we're still on our journey, and our journey right now allows for us to support our community of schools with our LMS, a platform. And the platform is built, again, for competency-based and project-based schools. You'll see a bit of that today. And the supporting services, CBE accelerators, readiness assessments, reference materials and webinars and the like, knowing that this journey is a challenge and it looks different based on local context and culture. And so we're excited to be here today, and our story is one, I think, much like Melissa had said, of resilience, of perseverance, of excitement, and it all comes back to the learners at the center. And so I'll turn it back to you, Melissa, for some learner voice.
So how it started, really in Spring Lake Park schools, which is, I think, if you're just starting this journey, this I think was one of the best decisions we made, and it's certainly not one that I can take credit for. It was a collective effort, was really with lead learners. And so, as we mentioned, we want to give some really tangible ideas for things you can do back in your own schools. And when we made the choice to move toward competency-based learning, we offered to our entire teaching staff, K-12, an opportunity to be part of an innovation cohort of lead learners. And we used strategic funding. We scheduled 3 kind of giant chunks of time throughout the school year for them to do this learning, really learn what is competency-based learning, what do we mean by that, and then actually write our first drafts of our competencies and rubrics, and then pilot them in small scale ways in their classrooms so that we could learn from those earlier iterations. So I want to let you hear directly from the teachers who participated in this. And I just want to remind you, it really helped us start our journey into competency-based learning. And it was a lot about changing mindsets and some of their experiences.
Take your 4, create an 8, and have your outcome identified. Again, we'll give you a little bit more time, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. This week, we've been bringing in a group of teachers to start thinking about what is competency-based learning and why are we doing it, what the learning looks like in a competency-based system, and how our teachers can apply that in their classrooms. So we're a group of lead learners, and what that means is we're just learning first. And then we will help do some planning around it, how this will look in the district, and bring other people along as they learn as well with us.
Competency-based learning really is having our students apply deep, meaningful learning to authentic real-world situations. If I'm competent in something, I can leave the walls of our school and I can do it there and I can use it outside of our walls.
If students can just Google the answer or type it into their calculator, maybe we shouldn't be spending so much time concentrating on that skill and instead taking all of those skills and having them apply it to something that's more relevant to them. We need to do a better job of preparing them to be thinkers instead of memorizers.
We're not saying like everything's going to change tomorrow, but we're going to start tomorrow. It's like that.
This past week, I went home exhausted mentally, which is a good thing.
It's been really challenging work, but also really rewarding.
They've been rock stars. They've gone through a lot of different levels of not really knowing what it means and then getting to a place where they're excited and then really just realizing it's hard work, but they're so willing to do the hard work because they can see the end game and they can see why it's so important and beneficial for their kids.
We've been working really hard. This week, we'll meet again right before conferences and then meeting for another 2 5-day stints in December and in January to continue that work.
It's going to take all of us working together towards that common goal. We all know that we want students to walk out of 12th grade with a high school diploma. We also want them to be better citizens in society. And I think if we all have that end goal and we all work towards it, I think it's going to be really great to see and really fun as we continue through the experience.
Take your 4, create a...
Sorry about that. Okay. So I can't speak highly enough about our innovation cohort because they really continue to organically scale this work, which was the idea. So the only problem with the innovation cohort was that we scheduled it during the 2019-2020 school year. And so all of our plans for 3rd trimester around piloting and doing some refinement were, slightly derailed by this thing called the pandemic. Now we punted, we decided that summer after in 2020, we're going to use the pandemic. This was across the district to reinvent ourselves as much as we can. And rethink the way we've always done things. But I want to highlight then out of that cohort and out of that work to what initially seemed like smaller scale innovations then happened. And we had levels of innovation in our district. And these were what we refer to as our let's try it levels. There's not a significant amount of resources that are needed, but we're going to try something and we're going to learn from it. So the first was one of our innovation cohort members that you would have, that was in that video, decided really to like simply go for it. Bring her colleagues along. They created a full year, fully competency-based English language arts course for their 11th graders, meaning they were using our very drafty competencies and rubrics that had been developed during the cohort. And really tried to make it work as best they could within our traditional LMS and our traditional system of grading and reporting, but they structured their design of learning experiences completely different. And they really did a lot with communicating to families. And most importantly, they really taught their students what it means to develop a competency and demonstrate a competency in language arts. The second piece is that we began offering co-created courses to our students in grades 9 through 12, which is essentially an opportunity for teachers and students to partner to build a course that's tailored to student interests, and then the teachers and the students map out together how and when they'll reach that competency criteria. So before we move into some more dialogue here shortly, we wanted you to hear from our students. So I'm going to share a video with you that features 4 of our students who either were in the competency-based language arts course or the co-created course, talking about their experiences. We did not prep the students. You're going to hear from a variety of students, AP, kind of college bound, alternative learning, kiddos who are just ready for something different. And it's like the video is not overly polished on purpose, because we wanted it to really just authentically hear from the kids what this experience has been like for them. So.
When you learn in other classes, when you learn one thing, you learn it and you skip it, you never come back to it. In competency-based learning, you keep coming back to it, you keep coming back to it. And
really retaining the information, I guess, because usually with like the standard like unit organization of classes, it makes it really easy to just like do a unit and then completely forget about it at the minute the next unit comes. But like with this, you could keep doing it until you get that like competency.
It's basically, can you teach somebody else? That's what competency-based learning is about. In a normal class, you just learn it. Technically, you can't teach somebody else, but in competency-based learning, you keep coming back. And I'm at the point where I could teach somebody myself. The learning experiences were very cooperative, and it was very fortuitous for me, especially because first trimester, I didn't really do a lot. And second trimester and third trimester were kind of my peak trimesters where I really did a lot of work, and the learning experiences were even better because we came back to the same skills.
It makes it easier when I'm actually like personally invested in the topic for me to actually learn about it. So the competency-based learning, it gave me more freedom to like look at stuff I actually wanted to look at, and it made me more motivated. Sophomore year, I was writing an essay, and the thesis had to very specifically be about the conflict of like character X and character Z. And I was just like, I don't want to talk about that though. I want to talk about a different thing, you know? And so it gave me more freedom to actually focus on what I wanted to do. And that made me more motivated to actually like do the work.
I think what a co-create course means to me is you get to work alongside a teacher and you get to make a course tailored to yourself. It's not, you don't have to follow whatever the teacher wants, or the teacher doesn't exactly have to follow with all your ideas, but you like work together. At the beginning of geometry, I was learning transformations and translations, and that's like enlarging shapes on a graph or making them smaller. So what I did is I made this 3D perspective kind of art piece, and any way you look at it, it like turns into like first point, and you're like, it was like a cityscape kind of thing. So first point, you were like looking directly at buildings, and then from second point, you were like looking at it from like, maybe from like this angle, you're like looking at like the side of like the street, and you see like the corners of the building, and then from third point perspective, you could like see all the way down. It was like from like bird's eye view. It's like really cool.
Yeah, for each competency, I would come up with an idea related to my topic, which is baseball, and then we would discuss my topic, brainstorm a little bit, and then I would have more time to do that. Yeah, I chose baseball for my co-created physics topic because I wanted to do something that I liked. The baseball topic made physics easier to understand and more fun to do. And so I think I got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, so for college, I'm actually planning on majoring in like graphic design and illustration. So I think this class has helped me a lot with like knowing how those art concepts can fit in with anything. Like math and art don't really go together when you think about it, but I think it really does when you look back about concepts like geometry and chemistry even. I made like a piece. It was an alcohol ink flame art piece, and it was like really cool. I think I learned that I really can do anything if I put my mind to it, because like I used to struggle a lot with math in the past, and it was just like, it was kind of hard because I was just like, why don't I understand this? And I figured out that it wasn't the teacher or anything. Maybe it was just me because I thought I couldn't do it. So I think that really pushed me to grow more.
I learned for the 2 classes that I took, I procrastinate a lot, and that is a big college lesson that I learned early, so I guess that's good. Now, going into college, I feel like I'm more prepared to take a workload that doesn't involve teachers as much. The advice that I would give someone who's going to a co-created course, I would say to communicate with your teacher as much as you can, because they're there to help and not to pull you down, and have fun with it. What I really learned from competency-based learning was that my past mistakes won't just hold me back from my future outcomes, my future goals, my future targets. I, as a high school senior, still have a lot to accomplish in life. I'm just taking the first steps of being an adult soon, and I shouldn't let my past mistakes hold me back from becoming an aspiring citizen.
So again, Joey and I felt like it was really important that you hear from students in this session, and not just us, about their experiences and their why. And I hope that the theme that you heard throughout all of those videos was that of student agency. And part of that then, right, these innovations led us to LiFT, because as we started doing these co-created courses and building competency-based education, we needed a system that could support our kiddos who are on maybe what we would cite more as like a traditional path, some of our concurrent enrollment and AP courses, but we also had these co-created courses that students were taking, and we needed something that would also support them. And ultimately, because of the voice and choice that we're offering, we needed a system that can follow the learner, not the course, through their K-12 experience. And that brought us to LiFT. And Joey's I'm gonna turn it over to him. He's gonna give us a moment of some reflection and dialogue to think about where you all are on in this journey. And I am going to stop sharing so you can take over, Joey.
Mhm. Great, thank you so much. There's certainly more to say, and we're going to show you a bit of what that looks like up the other side of just a quick moment of reflection. So we're going to ask and send you to breakout rooms momentarily and ask for dialogue with new colleagues. We'll make groups of 3 or 4, 4 or 5, and we'll bring you back in just about 8 minutes. Just about 8 minutes, we'll bring you back. And we'd like the conversation to be around the slide you see in front of you. There are 3 images. Rhetorical question for now, but again, wanting to let this drive the dialogue in the breakout sessions. Which of these 3 images best represents where you are? Where would you place yourself in your role as a teacher and or a school leader, or your school leader in context of the district, or even a district leader? You get to define how to place the question, but 3 images from left to right, and I think we can probably all identify with the number 1 at certain points, where it's just like it's pouring and lightning bolts and dark and it's hard and it's slippery and it's tough to make progress. And the middle image suggests that there are seeds and they're starting to germinate. And in the far right, number 3, it's a whole new world. And so you get to define where you are, but in the context of your conversation, we ask that you share a little bit about your story. Make sure you share the mic and be prepared. We'll do a quick via the chat share out when we come back in approximately 8 minutes. So Melissa, are we okay to send out to rooms?
Yep, I'm going to send you now, and you should be moved to a breakout room here in a second.
Excellent. Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. What we'd ask, if you feel so inspired, to share in the chats. If this could be a takeaway from your conversation. It could be where you are on this spectrum in the storm, or seeds of growth, or seeing light. It could be also from a bit of what Melissa and Spring Lake Park shared to be their journey. So the chat is open to share reflections, and that's something we'll come back to at the end of the session as well. And I'll also say that it's, in my experience anyway, in the classroom at the school and state level in New Hampshire, all of these happen at the same time. It seems like in one day, all of these images could ring true. So while we're looking for your self-assessments, there's also a recognition that it's probably more cyclical and a cycle of continuous improvement, rather than a linear growth from 1 to 2 to 3. So keep in mind, as we focus on the second half of our work today, we're going to ask you to identify micro shifts. So where are you now on this spectrum, and what's one little thing you could do, one policy, one lesson, one PD, one shift you could make to try and move closer towards your goal. Again, that's defined by you and your community, but just have that micro shifts in mind. And so with that, we wanted to share a bit of kind of what this thing is that we've described to you, LiFT Learning Platform. You've got an image from Spring Lake Park schools as to what the district looks like, and the demographics of the students, and the number of schools, and their vision and their journey, and that continues to evolve. And over the last 18 months to 2 years with Melissa and team, we too, LiFT, have learned from Spring Lake Park schools and the needs of their community, both in technology as well as in supporting services. And so I share with you right now a learner view of the LiFT Learning Platform, where a learner is logged in and in one space, one learning management system, can identify where they are on their progress towards mastery, competency, proficiency, whatever language is used by the school, because the school defines the skills framework. It's never LiFT's work. We certainly have library and exemplars across our school communities, but one of the first things we do when working with the school is to define what the skills, knowledge, and dispositions are that the school values. Oftentimes it's a porch for learner, a porch for graduate, academic or personal skills, and they are embedded on the backside of the software. So when students and teachers co-create projects, as you're seeing here, emphasize on co-create, they can intersect with the skills framework so that there's a direct correlation and mapping between the competencies and the learner deliverables in alignment with the projects. And to the spirit of agency, we've heard that even in the keynote this morning, we've built the software to allow for co-creation. This is in alignment with our work with PBL Works and their gold standards. Oftentimes we support our schools and they're varying different places, but the shifting of autonomy and agency from teacher-centered to learner-centered, whereas in the beginning of a term, a teacher can create a project, can have multiple steps, a learner can add a step. As time goes on, maybe the number of teacher steps decrease and learner steps increase, with the expectation and hope that later in the year, when that shift of power is part of the culture of the classroom, a student can create their project. They can create their own steps. They can map to their own skills and competencies. They can self-assess, including feedback and dialogue and narrative that feeds up to these portfolios. And those portfolios are built from the skills framework. So that's the important work that we do with the school when we're first kicking off, is to say, what is the DNA of this learning community, as the work that happens in these projects should map to these portfolios. And with it, we can create a class grade. A class grade is made up of all the skills that are identified in projects in that class. And at the same time, the skills can go to the larger portfolios that sit above the class level. So you're able to explore what a student's level of mastery, proficiency, example, is in a skill portfolio that's fed by all of the classes. And what we believe to be is most important, and likely you believe the same as you're here at this event, those portfolios hold artifacts of learning from outside of school. So we don't think that learning is limited just to 7:30 to 2:15 or whatever times you may have. Learning happens, and it happens outside of school, and it all should count. So those portfolios can hold artifacts of learning submitted by the learners or community members, parents, co-teachers, et cetera. The teacher does remain the gatekeeper on the assessment components and the grading and reporting component of those skills. But the idea is that this platform is built for learner-led co-creation of projects that respects traditional silos, but helps schools move towards a competency-based approach, using a learner-led project-based instructional design. And one thing that we kind of mock ourselves for as we think of our evolution, and it's the creation of a competency-based gradebook. This is something that we have had and oftentimes when working with a school, they'll be like, oh, well, do you just have a gradebook for competency-based learning? It's like, oh, of course. And so I share that with you, that they exist, competency-based gradebooks. And one of the shifts that we've made in our journey of evolution is to allow for schools to translate grades back to alpha or numerical value, should they so choose. We've heard that to be a need from school districts, saying, I love levels of proficiency in a competency-based model. I can run reports and grades with narrative feedback, and the state and or district needs a number. And so we work with schools to set an algorithm, a grading pattern, level of proficiency, emerging, developing, proficient, exemplar equals DCBA 65, 75, 85, 95, or whatever variables is best for the learning community. And that ultimately leads to our most exciting work, and something that we in Spring Lake Park schools are continuing to evolve towards. And that is this understanding that these portfolios for a single student and a skill can show the student's journey towards mastery over time, grabbing artifacts of learning from various different, either traditional or more progressive classes, as a school gets to define what classes look like in LiFT and what subset of learners and teacher or co-teachers exists. And so this platform is supported again by a team of educators from the field who have lived this transition, and we are happy and proud to continue to support Spring Lake Park schools, and they us, in continuing to create a product, a platform, and supporting services to help schools move to that learner-led model. Where do we get started, Melissa? Oh, just watch your mute.
That was like a rookie mistake. All right. It's like beginning of the pandemic mistake. So where do we get started? So as Joey shared, there's a lot of different ways that LiFT can be used. And we also, I should mention, have used that in small ways. So with some of our co-created courses, with some of our career and life competencies. And so that's sort of been the beauty of these small scale innovations, for us to learn from them and refine. But there are 3 entry points that we've done district-wide and continue to do district-wide. So I'm not going to say that we've got this all figured out, because we're still working through it for sure. But, I would say we have varying levels of skill with strong backward design of units. And we really need all of our teachers in Spring Lake Park schools to be exceptional designers, because our end game is that we want, and it's imperative for personalized learning, we want our teachers to teach our students how to backward design. that is the ultimate goal, and move to that facilitator role. And so that's one area that we have done a lot of professional learning around. We continue to do a lot of professional learning around. We continue to really look at what does that mean to backward design a unit and begin to infuse a lot of the things you've probably already been hearing today, like how do you infuse self-direction and voice and choice into that, which also goes to that next bullet point. Even before we brought in our innovation cohort, we did a lot of professional learning on depth of knowledge and application of that through amplifying performance assessments. This is still, again, an area where we're continuing to do a lot of work, because that depth of understanding, depth of knowledge and performance assessments is so crucial for competency-based education that is a piece that we have continued to work on implementing throughout our system. And then a few years ago, we developed our career and life competencies, and they went through a lot of iterations. We got teacher voice, industry, partner voice, student voice, parent voice, and really, especially this last summer, got those career and life competencies and the accompanying rubrics for students to self-assess, right? These are just used as a form of feedback and self-assessment. But a lot of our teachers have found that the career and life competencies are a really great entry point into this work. It's a kind of a way to dip your toes in that maybe feels a little bit less overwhelming than changing up the entire way that you do instruction. And so that's another piece that we've been focusing on. These are all levers in our work, and I can't say enough that we're still really on this journey. This year we are bringing in groups of teachers again to continue to refine our competencies and the accompanying criteria on the rubrics, and then our learning progressions. We haven't shifted yet as a system to reporting by competencies, but we have started connecting our report card targets to our competencies, doing some of that change readiness with all of our stakeholders, not just our teachers. And then, if you look at these 3 bullet points, we continue to emphasize to our teachers that if they're doing this work, if they're working on backward design, depth of knowledge, elevating performance assessments, then they are on the path with us. They are doing the right work. And I think that's really important to emphasize just how many entry points there are into this work, and that it is a multi-year journey. Joey, can you click me to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So this is an image of our competencies for Spring Lake Park Schools. You can see on the top, we have our career and life competencies. And then on the bottom, we have our academic competencies. I always like to note that the size of the arrows is similar, because we don't want to say that one is more important than the other. In fact, we feel strongly that both are in fact imperative, and that those skills and mindsets for students help them access that rigorous content. This last summer, some of the work that we did was for our career and life competencies. We created a toolkit of really tangible lessons and ideas for how do you infuse, really strong digital literacy into your unit designs with students? How do you build self-direction with students, so that it's not just we say that we do these things, but we're trying to provide some really tangible resources. And then as you look at the academic competencies on the bottom, they are in varying states of completion. We finished our arts ones, our core ones are working on their learning progressions and refining those this year, and PE and our other electives, including how we're going to approach our world language and immersion and EL language is all on the docket. So we continue to work through that together. So I'm going to turn it back over to Joey now as we can finish out our time here together. We've got some good amount of time here at the end to share some micro shifts.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. And we certainly have left time for a dialogue. We ask for and hope for active participation in where you are. I know I've got 1 or 2 questions that have come in here through the chats. And So let's do that. Let's open up a larger dialogue. Either raise your hand, share in the chat, or feel free to come on video and share with us a little bit where you are. And you see these images that we shared a bit ago, and that progression of left to right does not suggest necessarily that is your path. But what came to mind for you, and where would you self-assess, and where would you like to go? Let's see, Mika.
Thank you. So I'm Mika from Portal Schools in California, and I think I'm really interested, and I hear it, Melissa, in your voice, that the academic competencies are still in work in a lot of your core classes as you're learning, figuring out like the learner progression. And I'm just wondering, is your approach to still see like backwards planning from traditional standards and state standards, or where are you kind of getting that inspiration to start with your learning progression?
Yeah, so the approach that we took, and I'll try to summarize it, it was obviously it took a couple of years, but when we first brought the teachers in who were part of the innovation cohort, we didn't actually start with when we use the standards as inspiration, but we really said, okay, if, in social studies, what would you say are the most important things K-12 that you really want students to walk away from? And certainly the standards informed that work, but we had a lot of protocols to kind of get to that, to have that dialogue in a really rich way. And we held it up against the definitions from the literature around what is a competency. And from there developed the rubrics. And the process we're actually in this year is taking our state standards and benchmarks and really now doing that last layer of refinement and really actually saying, okay, this benchmark is already captured within this competency. Like this is a benchmark that's already written at maybe a DOK 3 or 4, and it's a high level one. Here's some though that are those really foundational, skills and knowledge that if a kiddo doesn't have them, it's going to be difficult. Like it's a Tetris block, and we're mapping those learning progressions out. And our goal is that those will be like a got it, not yet, rather than we score a letter grade or we build a rubric around it. And so that's the work that we're actually doing right now is we did some of that mapping initially, and now we're coming back to mapping that and making sure that we're hitting those standards and benchmarks. And, it's tricky. Some content areas, I don't know how it is in your state, but like, for example, our new science standards are wonderful. Like they're already written really towards that, where we want to go. And so for some content areas, it was easier than others because they were already written in such a way that they could really inspire bundling a couple standards or benchmarks into a competency.
Thank you. And also just a quick nod to the Portal Schools model. I know it's one I'm familiar with in El Segundo, and the work that you're doing in giving learners agency, and with companies and community members to be able for students to drive projects mapped back to competencies is something, if I understand correctly, in your second year. So probably going through some of those growing pains and answering some hard questions and having moments of success and moments that are far more challenging. And so thank you for the question. Melissa, I have a question for you that came in through the chat, and while I ask and you respond, I'll also ask our other participants to share in the chat one micro shift. This is something as we kind of wrap up our session here. We ask for you to share one thing that comes to mind that is a micro shift that you can make in your context and your role as you think about your path. And Melissa, the question that came in was around culture. So in essence, how did you create the culture that was supporting this journey and get that buy-in? And how is the culture now to allow for this shift to happen?
Well, I'd love to say that, it's all wonderful and all great. But what we know about humans is that everybody moves to change in different ways. I think one of the ways in which we build culture is through things like inviting our teachers to constantly be a part of the work. So really having their voice, inviting them to I am not writing the competencies and criteria, nor is anyone else here at the district offices. Our teachers are writing the competencies and the accompanying criteria and the learning progressions. And so I think that that is a really important piece of creating the culture for this. But in order to do that, you also have to do the learning around what is a competency and why. And then I think student voice is really powerful. And the more you can capture student voice, the more that helps. And then we've just also, we've tried to give a space for like those lead innovators, and while at the same time reassuring everybody that they don't have to move at the same speed. So I think having, this is my fourth system I've worked in over my years in education. And I would say Spring Lake Park prides itself on innovation and taking risks and gathering student and teacher and community voice, so that even if people maybe aren't all in, they have been a part of that process or they understand it. And then creating that, collaborative culture as well. Did I answer the question, Joey? I feel like maybe I got off track.
No, you did, and we even heard from the chat too, and one of your team members who spoke to the culture and of a revisionist cycle, and the idea that that's part of this process, and I think that may not be the case. And then as a follow-up, maybe just let this sit out there of like, what if the school is not there? How do you shift that culture? Do you have any folks within your system of whom you've had to put attention on to get to the buy-in, and kind of what would that look like, and anything to come to mind there?
Yeah, I mean, I think storytelling is powerful. I think that having, lead, like a couple lead learners from a site who can organically do that work and then scale it is important. I think identifying, for some of our sites that have struggled a little bit more, as I mentioned in our first slide, we have said, okay, so like maybe you're not there yet with competency-based education. Maybe it's learner profiles for you. Maybe it's thinking differently about how you use time and space. So I think you have to offer choice. And then I think it's when you offer that choice and you have the dialogue and the conversation, I haven't found that we've met resistance because we're not saying everybody has to do this all the same way at all the same time. But we do have a vision for where we're heading, and we try to share that a lot. So, and again, we're figuring out, and I'm sure that because we are we're very focused on innovation in the design cycle, sometimes people would probably prefer that we just have it figured out and tell them what to do, and that we aren't able to do yet.
Yes. Thank you. Any other reflections as we wrap up, takeaways from the work today, where you are on your journey, or even something that is you find is working well?
Yeah, feel free to throw it in the chat, please, if there's anything that's helpful for anybody who's listening. Thanks, Chris, for sharing that link as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, as we wrap up here, and I know, Elliot, we do have you on the call as well, and you've seen many of these systems across the United States, and so feel free to share any reflections you have, and we'll also point to two things. First, the QR code on the screen you see here. Melissa and I, roughly 1 week from today, we'll meet together to host a space to continue this dialogue. So if you are not sure where to go next, or looking for a support system, or just want to continue the conversation, November 1 at 2 Eastern time, we'll host a session. You can register by following that QR code you see there. And the second is Aurora, as you'll hear in these sessions, is asking for feedback. And so a link will come into our chat, as Elliot has just shared, for the 1-minute survey. And both of those are, again, in the spirit of continued revision, helpful for us and for Aurora with these sessions. And then for us as a community moving towards a learner-centered model, we certainly encourage you to come to the follow-up or share within your network. It can be kind of your lead teacher or your colleague or whoever it may be to continue the conversation. And we've got one other question that came in here, Melissa, the question from Sarah: do you happen to know of solid working models where we can bring a team of 5 lead learners to observe?
I think it would depend on where you're located in the States. So maybe feel free to shoot Joey and I an email, and maybe Elliot might even have some ideas on that. That may, depending on where you're located.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, feel free to email me also. And we have a blog post pinned on our website called Competency-Based Education Across America, which links to dozens of different schools and districts where this is happening. So that's another good resource, but feel free to email me. You can find my email address on the Aurora website. And Joey, as far as your invitation a minute ago, I just wanted to say this is wonderful, and so inspired, Melissa, to hear about your school and district's work. Your website, as I said to you before the session, is a wonderful resource for folks trying to do this work. And Joey, it's just great to see the evolution of the LiFT platform and the competency-based grading and the links to project-based learning and all of it. It's just wonderful facilitation of competency-based learning. So super exciting to hear everything that you guys are doing. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And again, we brought this session together to share our story, and everyone has their story, and you don't have to do it alone. So we'd love to continue to be in touch wherever you are on your journey. I hope this session has been helpful for you. I know I place such gratitude in Aurora as an organization. And so thank you, Elliot, to you and team, and Melissa for you and your team at Spring Lake Park Schools to take this, what you've said is a public school in every way, in a suburban, if not urban setting that has its own challenges, and moving towards what we at LiFT believe to be the future of teaching and learning, which is a learner-led model built in personalized projects mapped to skills. So a pleasure and honor to be here, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, everyone, so much. Don't forget to fill out the survey, and have a wonderful rest of your time with Aurora.
Thank you.